And we are back. Another week of the UFL done, kaput. As much fun as it was, it's kind of a weird one, in my opinion. Pretty much going through, the last couple weeks of the season. Obviously, Birmingham, Michigan, St. Louis, and San Antonio all clinched. St. Louis is obviously down their quarterback. So as we're seeing, the season take shape going into Week 10, we're still looking to see who are our conference champions, right? Well, obviously the game in Michigan versus Birmingham, this Week 10 preview, that game's being played in Birmingham no matter what. So it's kind of a little bit of a crapshoot there. Now you're kind of paying for pride a little bit. You got the 1-8 Showboats versus the 1-8 Roughnecks playing for pride. We might see, I know someone said, I forget who it was, so I apologize. You might see maybe a curveball in the draft like they did in 2022 between Michigan and the Maulers, if they choose to go that way, which is what Jim Pop was reporting. And I think Luke Miller was doing the retweets on that. But Jim Pop, the player personnel director, vice president, guy's been around CFL, a lot of these leagues. He's been with the USFL since 2022. Reporting that there will be a draft and whatnot. So obviously a lot's been said as we continue to look back on the season, as kind of everything kind of shapes up and what's going on and whatnot. It's kind of a bittersweet thing, in my opinion. For me personally, the season's flown by. I didn't get to go to any games this year. Obviously, I had a lot of work commitments. But I've watched every game. I've watched almost every game twice and whatnot. So it's been, a great experience to be a part of this league, been on a lot of these media calls and whatnot. But in the end, it is Week 10, and we do have 4 teams that are, their stories are coming to an end. So last week I went 2-2. Obviously I think I put too much faith in Manny Wilkins. I'm going to be straight up about it. Too much faith in Manny Wilkins, and I think I just rode the hot hand with Birmingham and whatnot, and then Michigan snuck it out for me, and then DC Defenders as well snuck, kind of dominated that game. Almost gave it up a little bit towards the end. Josh Love made it interesting, but overall, another solid slate of games in my opinion. Houston, no fight left. Anytime Stallions lose, America wins, that type of mantra. Arlington, no quit in that one. And as I was doing the prep for tonight's, video cast show, whatever you want to call it, something I've been going through a lot of these stats. And if you follow me on Twitter by Pat Ruffino, I love stats, because not only do I love the numbers, I love the fact of the accumulation of these numbers, because that means guys have been playing. And this past week, I wrote a column for UFL News Hub, really outlining Luis Perez and kind of having a serious talk. And Mike Mitchell brought this up originally, of how is this kind of the swan song for Luis Perez? He's 29 years old, and we'll talk about it as we get to the quarterback rankings as well. But is this the swan song for Perez? Is he kind of just going to go after this? He's coming up on 30 years old. Teamu, the same thing. And ironically, both those people play each other this weekend to finish out this season. So we'll talk about Perez a little bit when we bring him up. We'll talk a little bit more about Teamu and their legacies and whatnot. And we'll also talk a couple milestones. As I keep track of a lot of this stuff. Some cool things to point out that as we go through each game, I'll bring it up and whatnot. But as we continue to break down the games, talk about the games, we're going to start with our quarterback rankings. Now, this week, another 14 piece. 14 quarterbacks saw action this week. We had a debut, Holton Ahlers. You're a professional quarterback. Congratulations. I'm sure he, coming into this season, thought he'd be a little bit more up there. But in the end, it is what it is for the young guy out of ECU. Like I said, 14 different quarterbacks taking action this week, 13 of them throwing the pass. We saw some Jalen McClendon McClendon, him getting his first touchdown of the year. We saw Josh Love kind of, building on some of the stuff he had going on last year. So overall, I'm pretty satisfied. Continuing to see guys get reps, continuing to see players, have the ability to continue to push on and extend their careers. With that being said, let's start with the quarterback rankings. Number 13, Troy Williams. Troy, if you don't know, first off, they cannot get a good picture of him in his Showboats uniform. And that's why we continue to use the Pittsburgh Mauler uniform. So Troy gets the start for Memphis. Obviously, they lost. Continuing, Cookus is banged up. Troy is banged up. Love, QB2. Cookus wasn't even active this week. And he goes 4 of 7 for 15 yards. Very anemic. Pulled him in just before the first half. Gave Josh Love the opportunity. But what we're seeing with Troy is a lot of uncertainty in the pocket. We're seeing him not really getting comfortable. Darius Victor had a pretty good game, going over 100 yards. They're not utilizing, Sage Surratt the way they probably wanted to this year. David Davis was left relatively, famished, had 1 reception for 5 yards. Didn't really get Papali going until, back end when Love came in. And then Jonathan Adams, pretty quiet as well. Big thing about Troy is I don't think he plays next week. I'd like to see them give the start to Josh Love. Guys grinded. Shout out to Troy, though. He did cross 2,000 career passing yards between this season and last with the Pittsburgh Maulers. Troy's been around. Really one of those guys that I think the league is going to have a kind of a coming to Jesus moment. And it's a lot of these guys, in my opinion. I think Troy should give this another year. I think he's played well enough in the past. I think there's a lack of stability on that offensive line. I think the Memphis coaching staff deserves another year. Flip knows ball. I talk to him almost every week. He knows what's going on. It's just sometimes it's less about the X and the O's and more about the Jimmies and the Joes. But that's Troy. He's our number 13 quarterback this week. Obviously, our honorable mention going to be Holton Ahlers. But Troy gets number 13 for us. And once again, congrats on going over 2,000 yards. Number 12, I put Jalen McClendon, 3 of 6 for 40 yards, 5 rushing attempts, 14 yards. Couple knees, that's what took it down. And he got his first touchdown on the ground. McClendon, he doesn't get the graphic for this. I'm sorry, I'm not going to make one for it. But he just crossed 1,000 yards. For McClendon, he is putting on an audition for a lot of these teams if they want to choose him for next year. DC picks up Mike DeLeo. Curious to see if they elevate him for next week over McClendon. See if they want to get him some reps. I'm curious to see what those conversations with with Teamu and Von Hutchins and Reggie Barlow are like. I'm not calling for Reggie Barlow's head at all. I am 100% invested in that guy continuing to run the show over there. And in my opinion, McClendon could be a guy to come in there and be able to provide some value. Still athletic. Still probably pretty fresh, too. Like we talk about, anytime McClendon comes on these rankings, he still lacks a lot of experience. He did not get that experience in college. Last year was his most playing time he's got. So I'd like to see him come in for another year. Overall, though, great to see him get that touchdown. After passing for over his career 2,000 yards last week, Quinton Dormady is our number 11 quarterback. Dormady went 3 of 4 for 44 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. He was taken out of the game due to injury. I'm curious to see if he's even active next week. But my kicker is do you want to risk Garbers getting hurt? Now, in my opinion, if you think Garbers gives you the best chance to win, you've seen Dormady play well. You've seen him be pretty successful. And not only that, the Battlehawks have seen Garbers as well. Now, if he's rusty and needs reps, I think you throw him out there for a quarter or two. If he's good to go, Dormady, that is, I think you kind of split reps with them so they both have it going in there. And then you kind of ride the hot hand in in trying to win the conference championship. But it's a weird spot for these guys, both Beck and Wade Phillips, on what they want to do in order to, gain the advantage, but also wanting to be healthy. Coming in at number 10, I put Reed Sinnett. 6 of 11, 57 yards, no passing touchdowns, no rushing attempts, no picks. Sinnett, behind that offensive line, you're going to need a runner. You're going to need a guy like Troy Williams. Obviously, they're very heavy on Nolan Henderson, but it's too much backyard ball for me. What made them very effective as an offense last year was obviously Mark Thompson, but even with TJ Pleasure in there, they ran a lot of 12 personnel, in which they actually ran a more pro-style traditional mid-2000s offense with Kenji Bahar. Now, if Kenji Bahar is able to move you down the field the way he did last year in assistance of Mark Thompson, you should probably go with that. You saw Josh Peterson. He exploded for, an NFL opportunity. I think he had 34 catches or something like that. He had a pretty good year last year. You really would have thought with guys like Brandon Bowman, Brandon Brayman, Bowen, and Clint Sig, that you would have had a decent opportunity to really utilize those big tight ends and then utilize the quick game with Kurt Merritt, who got hurt, and Justin Hall. Big congrats to Justin Hall, by the way. He goes over 1,000 receiving yards. He did it in about 18 games. He's a 2023 guy, so he did it in 2 seasons, just like Hakeem Butler. So really pumped about that. Obviously, solid player, real quick gadget player, able to stretch a field, able to go underneath, a little bit small, but in the end, the guy is a baller, has continued to show out. He's all USFL last year. He'll probably be all UFL this year. And, when I do my Marquez team with Reed Johnson, I'll probably put him on there as well. But Sinnett, average performance, nothing too crazy. Love to see him kind of progress and move forward. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like this is the Reed Sinnett show. It looks more like it's the Nolan Henderson show next week. So coming in at number 9, I'm putting Manny Wilkins. Wilkins last week was like number 5, number 6. This week he's kind of teetered down to number 9. He goes 18 of 32, 172, 1 touchdown, 3 picks, 10 rushing attempts, 51 rushing yards, and 2 touchdowns. It kind of seemed that with Wilkins, like many mobile quarterbacks, he got a little too antsy. He's playing too much backyard ball. Hopefully he takes from this experience and learns a lot. They weren't able to really utilize Butler. It seems like he kind of got figured out a little bit, and ultimately they come away with a loss. A lot of those points obviously leading to turnovers. Arlington is not a bad team, despite what that record says. Their defense isn't great. A lot of issues on special teams. But in the end, you can't turn over the ball 3 times and expect to have a win. Great for Wilkins to continue to gain experience. I wonder if they had a more conservative game with Brandon Silvers, if that would have translated into a win. Obviously, we do not know that. But in the end, we're really looking forward to a return of A.J. McCarron. He was QB2 this week. I think you play McCarron for about 3 series next week, and you just throw the ball the whole time. That reason, because I think you just want to keep that arm loose, let him move around, all that good stuff. Could it risk injury? Yeah, it could, but he got hurt in the playoffs as well. I think utilizing Wilkins maybe to take some of the heat off him in these read options wouldn't be a bad idea, or maybe on like a third and forever, where you just kind of have him throw, get a little goofy and whatnot. But in my opinion, I just don't know if it's worth the squeeze to utilize McCarron out there and, on these longer rushes and everything like that. I'm not sure. Personally, like I said, 3 series, get him out there, let him throw the ball around and whatnot. It depends on what they want. If they're trying to win this game, I think we might see some of the read based off like what San Antonio's doing. But ultimately, that's going to come down to Coach Beck and company. Wilkins finishes up at number 9. Real rusty performance. Some of that backyard ball just didn't work out for him. Coming in at number 8, a 2022 alum of the league, Josh Love. Love has been around with the Pittsburgh Maulers. Still got to get a better picture of him they haven't posted a great one yet for me to use. Love's was with the Pittsburgh Maulers, spent the last year and change with Michigan. They moved on from them, go on to the Memphis Showboats. Got a little bit of play last week. This week did some good stuff. Obviously, throws a touchdown, 9 of 14, 105, one touchdown to 2 picks, 2 rushing attempts, 9 rushing yards, and a touchdown as well on the ground on a tush push. When you got a guy like Josh Love, you know what you're going to get. I think he gets to start next week. I saw some jokes about people saying that he should be the starter in 2020 in 2025. I personally think their starter is not on any of these teams next year. But that's just how the coin goes, right? If for lack of a better term, that's how the cookie crumbles, whatever the verbiage you want to say is, right? I'm a big fan of Love. I think he's a great QB2. I don't know if I want him as my QB1, but in the end, you've had Cookus out there. He's gotten beat up. You've had Troy Williams out there. He's gotten beat up. It doesn't really matter who the Showboats are putting out there at this time. Everyone's getting their butts kicked. And if they want to continue to make that step forward and be a competitive football team for 2025, they really need to focus on that offensive line, because at this point, it doesn't matter who's back there. It's going to be a bad time for anyone. Coming in at number 7, I'm throwing Danny Etling in there. This is the unquestioned starter, right? I don't think so anymore after the performance of Bryce Perkins. Michigan is down a couple key pieces on defense. They're down a wide receiver in Marcus Sims. Etling coming in there, going 12 of 18, 110, 0 touchdowns, 1 pick, 2 rushing attempts, 10 rushing yards. Etling is a lot more athletic, I think, than people give him credit for. And because of that, I really would like to see what they do with Perkins with Etling. But on that flip side, the dominance of Perkins that we've seen, single-handedly putting the team on his back for only, a quarter and a half and whatnot, or 2 quarters, coming in the second half and almost rushing for 100 yards on the ground, Bryce Perkins, that is, it's unmatched. I think Etling did a lot of good stuff this year. I think if the situation was different, that, we'd be having no problem if they didn't bring in Perkins. But the dominance of Bryce Perkins has been too much to overcome for Etling. And not only through his ability to evade the rush, but also make the clutch throws and everything like that. I will say Etling was plagued by drops. I think there were 3 or 4 bad drops from some Panthers receivers. Cole Hikatini, he dropped a pretty easy walk-in touchdown. They're pretty close to a touchdown. But in the end, I don't think many people could disagree that Bryce Perkins should and is the guy on that team. Coming in at number 6, Chase Garbers, thrown into action, right? Freaking just knocked off the IR and then ready to go play some football. Garbers goes 16 of 23, 139, 0 touchdowns, 0 picks, 4 rushing attempts for 10 rushing yards. Not much to say. Safe game, very middle of the tier, nothing too dynamic. Was able to keep away from Birmingham and whatnot. I really like what he did this whole game. It was a good way to ease him back into it, especially a team like Birmingham that's been so dominant over the last couple of years. Puts it over for the U.S., gives the XFL conference a win over the USFL, finishing out the year 9-7 in favor of XFL, so bragging rights and whatnot for them. Overall, truly safe pick for me as far as at the number 6. Really was kind of that middle ground between all these other quarterbacks to where he played well enough to not lose the game for his team. Coming in at number 5, I picked Nolan Henderson. I really liked what Henderson did. A lot of backyard ball, a lot of just figuring it out. Like I said with Sinet, they're not utilizing the tight ends enough. They're getting to, there just seems like so much turmoil. I don't know why CJ called a challenge on the 1-point conversion or 2-point conversion. I felt like it was kind of a silly waste of a super challenge. And then obviously you got a 3-point game. That Michigan defensive line is so dominant that you needed the more athletic guy back there. Breland Speaks running around, Kenny Wilkes before he got hurt, putting pressure. This Jay Gibbs guy that they picked up, a 2024 guy, he's made an impact. TJ Carter, Rondell Carter. You're seeing even young guys just signed off the street, Bumper Pool, making an impact. And when you have Kai Nakua back there, kind of roving the secondary, kind of ball hawking, really taking a lot from Frank Ginda with his injury. It's just extremely impressive to see. Honestly, staying on the Panthers, and we'll talk about this as we preview the game, really impressed to see what Breland Speaks continues to do. Really just overall solid performance from Michigan, able to come back, and on a hot day, humid, in Houston, no questions asked. These guys did their best to keep their air quote conference champions hopes alive. Coming at number 4, I put Adrian Martinez, 18 for 32, 211, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, 5 for 56. I think with the play of the 3 quarterbacks above him, minus some of these egregious throws and poor decision making, I felt that Martinez kind of is getting a little too cute. Well, I could be wrong on that. I still have him as pegged for my MVP. However, I kind of saw some of these same throws a little bit too cute when essentially he's out there and not taking some of these easy checkdowns, trying to push the ball. The connection between him and Jay Sternberger, unmatched. A lot of good stuff going on with that. However, I don't think he's grasping that it's okay to take the 5-yard throw. And I felt like Nolan Henderson has a little bit of that as well. Wanted to give 2 quick shout-outs for some Birmingham Stallions players. CJ Marable going over 2K all-purpose yards, 2,000 all-purpose yards in 3 seasons, and then DeMarcus Gates going over 200 career tackles in spring football. Gates, if you don't know, has played in the AAF, the XFL 2020, the USFL, and this is his 4th spring football season. Has also played in the NFL and in Canada as well. So big shout out to DeMarcus Gates on that one. My number 3 quarterback this week, that's going to be Jordan Ta'amu. Ta'amu, I thought, played an extremely clean game except for his 2 interceptions. He goes 20 of 24, 237, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks, 4 rushing attempts for 38 yards, 1 touchdown. A swan song, maybe, if you're feeling a little bit edgy on that front. Does Ta'amu want to come back? That's the real question. He's been a real solid piece in this league. He's been a real solid piece just over the last several years, watching him play, watching him develop, dealt with plenty of injuries. Shout out to John Yarborough after this week. He was playing the left guard position, very versatile, plays guard and tackle. He was able to kind of step up for Lamont Gilliard and really, really take a step forward and whatnot. And this is Yarborough, sticking on him, is a guy who's been around for a while. He's played in the Spring League. He's played in Canada. He's had a cup of tea with the Browns, USFL in 22, XFL last year with Houston. He's played on the Gamblers and the Roughnecks. And now called upon, a crafty veteran at this point, able to make an impact. They highlighted him a couple times as well. For Ta'amu to continue to stick in there with no De'Aaron King, no Abram Smith, 4 receivers gone, ton of retirements on the offensive line. Defense isn't as good as it was last year. My opinion, hats off to that guy. Continues to push forward, continues to make plays, and continues to be a valuable part of spring football and the brand for it as well. My number 2 quarterback, we talked about him earlier, Bryce Perkins. What could we say about Bryce Perkins that hasn't already been said? 12 of 15, 1 pick, 1 touchdown, 6 rushes, 76 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. It's just every week he gets better, the more reps he gets. Could this translate to the NFL? No. But do you want to sign him and have him on your practice squad in case, QB1 goes down and you want to run some 2 QB system with him running the read option? I don't think that's a bad idea. Perkins, I just need to see a little bit more standing in the pocket. There's been a couple times where he's kind of bailed out a little bit too early. He's done these jump passes and whatnot. I don't think that works in the NFL. He kind of tried to get away with that earlier, and it led to an interception on his first pass or second pass attempt. But in the end, I think he gives Michigan the best chance to win. I think he needs to be the QB1. going into the playoffs at least. Maybe you play two QBs next week, but in the end, Perkins has continued to get better, continued to develop, and he's a nice surprise. He's a great story for this league. Has the ties to Steve Kaiser, which makes sense. Kaiser was the one that scouted and was part of the team that drafted him when he was with LA. And now we'll see what happens. But ultimately, I think he's working his way back into an NFL opportunity. Coming in number 1, the Spring King. Like I said, I just wrote an article about this. You got a guy like Luis Perez, almost 7,500 passing yards in the regular season, almost 50 touchdowns in the regular season, continuing the battle, just crossed 2,000 yards in the regular season for the first time in his career. I don't personally think he gets much better than Perez as far as just consistency, the leadership, all the intangibles he brings to spring football in general. I have nothing bad to say about this guy. His character, the way he leads, the way he talks to people, it just every time he's out on that field, I feel like he not only makes his team better and gives them a chance, but also he brings so much opportunity and so much knowledge to the game that it is so exciting to see him to go out there every week. And in my personal opinion, it doesn't get much better than that. Like I said, he has crossed so many milestones. He's won the championship. And, when I was looking this up for him, obviously he goes to the Mega Bowl championship. He goes to and that was the Spring League. He goes to the, USFL playoffs. Finally, thinks he's going to be the guy with Vegas, dealing with Brian Scott, beats out Brian Scott. They bring in Brett Hundley, beats out Brett Hundley, gets traded, and then continues to persevere and push on for a guy who has just been counted out for years upon years. I just don't think he gets better than seeing a guy like Luis Perez succeed at this league, at this level, and continue to progress in his football career. Now, does he make an NFL roster or get an NFL invite? Probably not. A 30-year-old quarterback probably doesn't rave a sexy option for many teams. But if he does retire, I mean, we talk about it all the time as a joke. I definitely would love to see him possibly have a bust in Canton, because I don't think you can tell the story of football without Luis Perez. I don't think you can tell the story of spring football without Luis Perez. And, the word legend gets thrown around a lot. But to see a guy like Perez continue to go out there and progress and, make his team competitive when they have no business being competitive, to me, it says a lot. But with that being said, those are the quarterback rankings for this week, for week 9 going into week 10. Let me know who I where you disagree with. Let me know who's too high or too low. Going into the week coming up, week 10, final week, we might do some playoff start. Nick Thorne and I are going to talk about some guys that, as they come up and whatnot as well. But 4 games, 2 of them still important. All the playoff spots are taken care of and everything like that, but now we're playing for our conference championships, right? Who gets to raise the banner figuratively? Michigan and Birmingham starting it off. Man, in Protective Stadium, it's going to be hot. I'm going to call the upset on this. I'm going Michigan. Very curious to see how this Stallions team responds. I was getting a little hyped. I thought we're going to get some Jamar Smith action. I doubt that happens this week. You take Michigan, if they play Bryce Perkins, I think 90% of the snaps. Michigan gave him a fight with E.J. Perry. E.J. Perry, very mobile. Bryce Perkins, even more mobile. E.J. Perry, a little erratic with his throwing ability. Bryce Perkins, a little bit erratic with the throwing ability. On a hot day in Alabama, anything could happen. I think I'm going to go with I'm going to go with Bryce Perkins and the Michigan Panthers. At this point, let's see what Mike Nolan can do. That defensive line, real dominant. I'm curious to see who they bring in with Kenny Wilkes out. Levi Bell obviously hurt. Mike Tafua getting some more reps and whatnot. But Breland Speaks, I think, is going to bring it. And, if it gets a little jittery for Martinez back there, He's going to be a little off kilter. He's going to be a little off centered. We'll see what happens. But for me, I'm going with I'm going with Michigan. I'm calling that upset, and I'm excited to see it. Game number 2, same thing. What are we doing here? If Manny Wilkins starts, I think I pick San Antonio. If the Battlehawks continue to, kind of mess around and whatnot, I don't know. Do they play all their starters? I don't know what the vibe is for that. It's just, I think with the injuries in the secondary, if Garbers goes out there, gets comfortable, I think San Antonio can win this. Now, I think as well, talking out both sides of my mouth, that if you go with AJ and you give him a quarter or two, you're going to see a Battlehawks victory. I think they'll get ahead and they'll push forward on that. Now, I think Wade is going to go out there and try to win this game. I think Beck is going to try to go out there and win this game. I think they're going to be keeping AJ on the pitch count. And this one's another toss-up for me. If it's a week from now, I say St. Louis. But this week, I'm going with San Antonio. I hate to say it. Getting an incomplete game from AJ, in my opinion, is not enough. Going into our Sunday games, what are we thinking here? Kind of the best for last, right? If you can even call it that. Renegades versus DC, a matchup of the championship game from last year. Not too sexy here, but I think we see another 3-touchdown performance from Luis Perez. Last week he goes 259 for 3 touchdowns, 4 rushing attempts, 8 yards. I think he dices them up. I think he's going to know exactly what Greg Williams is going to do. I think Te'amu in that offensive line is too banged up, if we're still on stream and everything like that. And big shout out to Sam Murray from Shady Sports Network. Always a supporter. Love that guy. Awesome dude. If you're watching and you're curious about the Indoor Football League, Sam Murray's the guy to go to. Loves this stuff. Loves indoor football. He's got a great team over there. There's a couple guys as well. Some of their names escape me right now, but definitely give Sam Murray some love if you haven't been watching him and whatnot. But getting back to the game, wouldn't be some that both these quarterbacks, if they called it quits after this, be an era of spring ball gone. Te'amu's played the last 4 seasons. Perez about 6 seasons. I'm not really sure how worth it is for them to come back and get their heads knocked for about $50K. I think a lot of these guys with these pay loss on all 8 of these teams, I think a lot of them might be calling it quits after this. Seems like every week I do a quick article about some of the retirements. Gerard Fernandez, Chris Orr, Hercules Matafafa, Manny Bunch, Kyle Oleta, continue to go down the list of guys who have called it quits. I don't know. Either way, this is a game I'm going to be really glued into. I'm really going to be, at the edge of my seat watching, because I might be watching some of my favorite players who I've watched play since, personally, with it being Memorial Day as well. I used to watch, Luis Perez on YouTube all the time, because that's how we used to watch the AAF games. They were illegally streamed on YouTube, and seeing him possibly hanging up, it's a little sad. But it's some of the worst times. Being abroad, you get to watch some football. It was always a good time when you were doing that with the boys. But getting back to business, I'm picking the Arlington Renegades to win this game. Really excited to see the show that Luis Perez puts on, and Sal Cannella. And also, quick shout out, by the way, Juwan Manigo. He goes over 1,000 all-purpose yards this year. If you don't know who Manigo is, from the LFA, the Mexican Football League, Liga de Futbol Americano. So really awesome to see that. He's been their return specialist. And also, DC Defenders Chris Rowland, he goes over 2K all-purpose yards for his career. So Rowland's been around since the Spring League, has been extremely versatile. He's actually played NFL games as well. I could see Roland getting an opportunity to go back to the NFL after the versatility that he has showed both in the punt return, the kick return, as a receiver, and has been in the backfield a bunch of times as well. He also has a brother. I believe he is playing in the some arena league right now. There's so many of them. Our final game of the week is the Houston Roughnecks versus the Memphis Showboats. We're giving shout outs, gives Titus Swen a shout out from the University of Wyoming. He went over 1,000 all-purpose yards this year. Really, really, really encouraging. There's 4 of those guys to do that so far. Roland, it's Roland, Darius Shepard, Titus Swen, and Manigo. So 4 of those guys have went over. Really, you see about 3 or 4 get to that 1K K mark. I thought Isaiah Henny would have got it this year, but they released him. Next person on that list is Justin Hall. He's at 680, so we won't really see anything more from that unless Justin Hall goes for 320 if they put him back there and whatnot. But overall, obviously, a very disappointing year for the Showboats. I'd like to see a Josh Love start, just get him some more reps, see if he wants to come back for 25. At this point, I'm going to go Memphis. I just think there's so much turmoil over there in Houston that personally I don't feel that it exudes much confidence. They throw Nolan Henderson out there. You got Big John Atkins. You got Jordan Ferguson on that defensive line. Let's see what happens. Vontae Diggs, another guy on the Memphis team. He's played the last couple of years in Canada. And, the USFL, what's he going to do as far as how healthy and how ready to go he is? Is he going to be done for the year? I'm not really sure. Overall, I feel pretty confident picking Memphis. I think a lot of these guys are fighting for their jobs next year as well on Memphis, not just the coaching staff. I think they're safe, but the players in general, a lot of them are getting a little bit older. We'll see what happens, but ultimately the way Houston's played this year, some of the mismanagement and everything like that, I'm not really too high on, and that's why I think Memphis will play a cleaner game, a better coach game, and ultimately they will get the victory. So I wanted to turn it over to, before we get out of here, some of the stats and everything like that. Kind of coming down to these final stats, looking at what's going on, highlighting a couple guys here. Last year we had about 3 or 4 of these quarterbacks break the 2,000-yard mark, which is kind of that benchmark. This year it really looks like it's only going to be Perez, Teamu 1,600, Martinez 1,500, but didn't play all the whole year. 1,400 from AJ, who hasn't played the last 3 games. I think he would have broke it. I don't know if we're going to get a 20 touchdown quarterback this year. Last year we had 2, and then Magoo in the USFL, so that gave us 3. Going the rushing yards, I'm very curious to see, does Adrian Martinez, does he hold strong as the leading rusher with 487? Usually you'll get about 3 or 4 of these guys to break 500. It's still possible. We could see a Davion Smith 150-yard performance. Colburn, how many carries does he get? Does he even dress and whatnot? He's at 401. The only real one that I could see possibly, doing anything crazy, maybe Vito. They just keep feeding him with Josh Love back there. He had over 100 yards last week. Wouldn't be crazy to me to see that. As far as the coveted 10 touchdown mark, not a lot of guys really get this. Jacob Sailors, good bet to get it. Pearson, I thought, was going to get about 14. He kind of burst in the first couple of weeks, was poaching a bunch, but Jacob Sailors is at 8 touchdowns right now. Another thing to look out for, in my opinion, sacks. Really curious to see if we get another explosion from Carlos Davis, a 3-sack performance. With these running quarterbacks, is he going to be able to keep up? I don't know. I think if Speaks can get to that 10 high water mark, that personally would maybe be enough to win the Defensive Player of the Year. I think Carlos Davis kind of shot out the barrel a little bit originally, but the last couple games, Speaks has been on point, and he continues to dominate. We'll see what happens. Also, as we kind of wind this down, the UFL has announced that there are no transactions today, so I think everyone's kind of just figuring it out. Curious to see what they do with a couple of these players who got nicked up the last day or two. Are they going to put them on IR? What are they going to do with that? I'm not really sure. But overall, guys, thank you guys for tuning in. Really appreciate it. If you're new here, drop a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Really appreciate the support on the channel. As we continue to grow, try to do more, fun stuff in the off season. I know I got Nick Thorne, him and I, once the season's over, we'll be going over some of these players that we're really pumped to see in 2025. Get the thoughts on that. I'll probably be jumping on the Markcast once I have my all UFL team all lined up. If you're a player and you, for whatever reason, are listening to this, I'm going to make a certificate. Reed and I are going to make certificates. We're going to mail them out. And if you want to put it on your wall, great. If you don't, I get it. I'm just some random guy on the internet. But overall, guys, thank you guys for tuning in. It's always a pleasure. Check this out. Share it with your friends. All that good stuff. But until then, I'll see you on the flip side.